Crime is a particular type of deviance. It's the violation of a norm that's been codified into law, for which you could be arrested and imprisoned. Official state-backed sanctions, such as laws, exert more power over the individual than do non-legal norms. For example, if you risked getting arrested for gossiping about your friend, you might think twice about doing it. Might, however, is the key word there, for the risk of arrest and jail time does not always deter people from breaking the laws. In fact, ordinary people break laws every day without really thinking about it. Speeding, rolling through those stop signs, stealing those pens and pencils from your teachers and friends. Being bad can feel good, and even for some, murder can feel righteous at the time that it's being committed. And these are among the many reasons that sociologists study crime. In fact, there's a word for the study of crime, criminals, and the criminal justice system: criminology. Criminologists ask and attempt to answer questions like the following. Who makes the laws? Who breaks them? Who benefits from defining and enforcing them? How do individuals begin committing crime, and how do they desist? What are the intentions and outcomes of law enforcement institutions? Using systematic data and social scientific theory, the work of criminologists contributes to our understanding of this type of deviance in our society. In the United States, crime is officially measured by the Uniform Crime Report, or the UCR, which is the FBI's tabulation of every crime reported by more than 18,000 law enforcement agencies around the country. In particular, the UCR is used to track the crime index, or the 8 offenses considered especially reprehensible in our society. Murder, rape, aggravated assault, and robbery are categorized as violent crime. Burglary, which is theft inside the home, and larceny, which is burglary of personal property, motor vehicle theft, and arson are considered property crime. Even though the UCR has been shown to be a flawed system, it is useful in helping to track trends in overall crime as well as particular patterns. And it also records the number of arrests made compared with the number of crimes committed, which is the most traditional measure of police effectiveness. Other trends are visible in the UCR as well. Property crimes occur more frequently than violent crimes. The most common crime is larceny, with burglary and motor vehicle theft trailing far behind. And although there has been a decline in rates of property crime in the last decade, it's not as extreme as the drop in violent crime. And with the arrival of the information age, the category of cybercrime has emerged, covering a wide variety of illegal violations committed via the internet. When criminologists look at quantitative crime data, which provide information on who is more likely to commit or be a victim of a crime, they may learn more about the cause of crime. We should, however, question the assumptions and biases of the data. For example, Robert Merton's theory of the self-fulfilling prophecy prompts us to ask, if society has a tendency to cast certain categories of people as criminal types, will this assumption ensure that they will indeed be labeled and treated like criminals? This has certainly seemed to be true in cases like the high-profile 2014 killing of unarmed black teenager Michael Brown by Ferguson, Missouri police officer Darren Wilson. And as David Matza warned, will our preconceived notions about a category of people influence our interpretations of numerical data? In this section, I'm going to talk to you about the relationship between crime and demographics, such as class, age, gender, and race, and examine alternate explanations for what may seem like clear numerical fact. Statistics consistently tell us that crime rates are higher in poor urban areas than in wealthier suburbs, but these higher crime rates may not actually be the result of increased criminal behavior. Rather, police tend to concentrate their efforts in urban areas, which they assume are more prone to crime, and thus make more arrests there. It appears that social class is more directly related to how citizens are officially treated by the police, courts, and prisons than to which individuals are likely to commit crime. And even if we do accept these statistics as an accurate representation of crime rates, such theorists as Robert Sampson and William Julius Wilson argue that the same factors that cause an area to become economically and socially disadvantaged also encourage criminal activity. Lack of jobs, lack of after-school care, and lack of good schools, for example, are all factors that can lead to economic strain and criminal activity. On the other end of the social class spectrum, white-collar crime has been defined by sociologist Edwin Sutherland as a crime committed by a person of respectability and high social status in the course of his occupation. White-collar crime can include fraud, embezzlement, or insider trading. Most white-collar criminals come from a relatively privileged background, and it is no coincidence that white-collar crime is policed and punished less strenuously than street crime. The younger the population, the more likely its members are to commit crimes. Criminologists have shown that this relationship between age and crime has remained stable since 1935, with the peak age for most arrests being 19. In the United States, 15 to 19-year-olds make up 6.5% of the population, yet account for 13% of criminal arrests. In addition, there's a specific set of laws, courts, and correctional facilities for juveniles. Some acts are only crimes when they are committed by people under 18. Curfew violations, for example. Juvenile courts usually involve bench trials, no jury, and some sentences, such as moving the offender into a foster home, are only applied in juvenile cases. On the other end of the spectrum, people 65 and older make up about 15% of the population and account for only 1% of arrests. We call this trend aging out of crime. Here too, however, we must be careful about what we read into official statistics. Since our stereotypical image of a criminal is youthful, it may be that the police and public are more likely to accuse and arrest young people and less likely to target seniors. In addition, youth may commit more visible crimes, like robbery or assault, while older people may commit crimes that are more difficult to detect, like embezzlement or fraud. Males are more likely than females to commit crime. In fact, males accounted for 89% of arrests for murder and 73% of all arrests in 2015. Earlier researchers hypothesized that gender difference in crime rates was based on physical, emotional, and psychological differences between men and women. The logic was that women were too weak, passive, or unintelligent to commit crime. This argument has been replaced by a focus on the social and economic roles of women. Starting in the 1970s, criminologists found that lower crime rates among women could be explained by their lower status in the power hierarchy. Conflict theorists such as James Messerschmidt argued that once women start gaining power in the labor market through education and income, crime rates among women will rise more closely to match those among men. This hypothesis has largely been supported by recent trends. Between 2006 and 2015, the number of males arrested decreased by more than a quarter, while the number of females arrested increased by only 12%. So while at first glance it may seem logical to argue that women's crime rates are lower because of genetics, on closer examination we see that social structure plays an important role. The relationship between race and crime is a controversial one. According to the UCR, African Americans make up 13% of the U.S. population, but account for 27% of all arrests. Once again, sociologists caution against making a link between biology and criminal behavior. Instead, they maintain that the relationship can be explained by Merton's self-fulfilling prophecy and by class variables. For example, we could hypothesize that African Americans are exposed to higher rates of crime because more of them live in lower class neighborhoods, and that here it's a class that matters more than race. Race shapes life experiences even after criminal offenders have paid their debt to society. Legal scholar Michelle Alexander makes the argument that once African Americans, and in particular African American men, come into contact with the criminal justice system, they're permanently stigmatized and stripped of their civil rights. As she explains in her book, The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness, they are legally denied the ability to obtain employment, housing, and public benefits, much as African Americans were once forced into a segregated second-class citizenship in the Jim Crow era. When criminals deliberately target victims because of their demographic characteristics, it's classified as a hate crime. Hate crime charges are usually added to other criminal charges, such as assault, arson, or vandalism, when it's suspected that the original crime was motivated by bias. Such crimes are investigated and prosecuted at both the local and federal levels. National hate crime statistics are collected by the FBI, although not all local jurisdictions participate in the counts. Given this information, we should recognize the likelihood that official statistics underreport hate crimes. In 2015, the FBI reported 5,850 hate crimes, of which close to 60% were racially motivated, and close to 20% of targeted victims because of sexual orientation. The question of deterrence is part of an ongoing debate about our criminal laws. Theorists who maintain that offenders carefully calculate the cost and benefits of each crime argue that punishment has a deterrent effect. that if the punishment seems too severe, people won't commit the crime. And that's the logic behind California's controversial 3 strikes law. The punishment for 3 felonies is an automatic life sentence. While deterrence theory seems practical enough, it is important to note that in matters of sociology, seldom is there such a direct and casual link between the 2 factors. In this case, the cost of punishment versus the benefit of the crime. Other justifications for punishment include retribution, the notion that society has the right to get even, and incapacitation, the notion that criminals should be confined or even executed to protect society from further injury. Some argue, though, that society should focus not on punishment, but on rehabilitation. The prison system should try to reform the criminal so that once released, he will not return to a life of crime. Each approach to punishment invokes different ideas about who the criminal is and what his relationship is to the larger society. Is he someone who can plan ahead and curb his illegal behavior so as not to face a possible negative outcome? Is she someone who can work toward personal transformation? Is he someone who must be punished quid pro quo? Or should she just be removed from society permanently? In the United States, the local, state, and federal government bureaucracies responsible for making laws together with the police, courts, and prison systems make up the criminal justice system, a system that, like any other social institution, reflects the society in which it operates. This means that while the American criminal justice system provides important benefits, such as social control and even employment for its workers, it also replicates some of the inequalities of power in our society. The research of Victor Rios, whom focuses on this issue. Rios, who's a professor of sociology at the University of California, Santa Barbara, went from gang member to PhD, partly because a teacher intervened and put him in touch with a mentoring program at a local university. Otherwise, Rios believes he would have become another victim of the youth control complex, his term for the way a variety of institutions, including law enforcement, the judicial system, and public schools, work together to criminalize, stigmatize, and punish working-class youth. Rios believes that the educational system has embraced a self-defeating strategy by adopting the attitudes and tactics of law enforcement, even as law enforcement and the judicial system have turned to more draconian measures. Increasingly, our society attempts to control gang violence and drug use with brute force, but this sort of indiscriminate policing often creates the very crime it is designed to eliminate, as enhanced policing, surveillance, and punitive treatment of youth of color help to create a school-to-prison pipeline. In another example of the dysfunctions of the criminal justice system, in 2003, 17 inmates on Illinois' death row were found to be innocent of the crimes for which they had been sentenced to die. Some cases involved errors made by overworked or underqualified defense attorneys. Further, more than 2/3 of the inmates were African American, many of them convicted by all-white juries. As a result, then Governor George Ryan became convinced that capital punishment was unfairly and even wrongly applied in some cases, and he suspended the death penalty altogether, and it was officially abolished in Illinois in 2011. When inequities and errors such as this exist in the criminal justice system, we must question the true meaning of the word justice in our society. One trend in corrections in the United States is the switch from government-run prison systems to privately run penitentiaries. Once prisons are privately contracted, they become for-profit businesses that push for increased state subsidies while adopting cost-saving measures such as requiring unpaid labor from inmates and reducing spending on education, healthcare, and food for inmates. When prisons become businesses, they become more focused on their bottom line and pleasing shareholders than rehabilitating their prisoners. Critics of private prisons question the benefit of this trend, especially given the rapid increase in incarceration rates that has overlapped directly with the increase in prison privatization over the last 20 years.